Hello and welcome to the Society with Fatma Shaheen at PTV World. Sports, as we all understand, play a very dominant role in our society. The way we perceive sports has changed over a period of time, more particularly in light of the technological advancements and, of course, the increasing use of social media. How do we as a society perceive sports today? This is something that we'll be talking about during the course of today's conversation. We'll also be talking about the very pivotal role of sports in community building, in boosting tourism, and of course, being that factor which of course brings about peace. In this regard, when we talk about sports, it's also very important to talk about inclusion in sports. We'll be talking about the need for there to be greater women participation, and by that yardstick, the need for there to be greater participation of differently abled persons in Pakistan when it comes to sports as a profession. We'll also be talking about the challenges that various individual sports persons face, more particularly female athletes, and of course what is it that we need to do if we aim to aspire to of course overall improve both the quality and of course the standard of sports in Pakistan. This and much more to follow on today's show, that too with an extremely diverse panel. Let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for the show today is Usman Raza Jameel Saab, who's a sports lawyer. He's also a sports enthusiast. Assalamu alaikum sir and welcome to the show. Alongside him I have Hassan Qureshi Saab. He's a sports analyst. Assalamu alaikum sir and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
My third panelist for the show today is Rai M. Azlan, who is a sports social expert. Assalamu alaikum sir and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And via Zoom we'll be joined by Miss Norina Shams, who is an international athlete. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, to get the conversation started with you, Usman Saab, at a very basic level, we understand the fact that, there was this time in Pakistan where, educational institutions, they very actively invested in actually producing, or for that matter, training, talented sports person. Where did we lose ground on that trend and what reasons do you attribute to the same?
Well, I think the biggest issue is that educational institutions today don't want to focus on the necessity of having sports as a means to foster community competition and also harnessing excellence in students. The focus more is on academics plus information technology in academics, and now students in schools are not being encouraged to participate in competitions with other schools and whatnot. So it's
all those, I think, intra-school competitions that we once used to have. I think those are just gone out of the window, unfortunately. But I think adding to this is something very unfortunate, because I'm sure as a parent you would also agree with me on this, because if you inculcate that child's interest in sports, that too at a very primary level, it is something which kind of helps them not only of course at school level but later on in personality development. And of course I think now, considering we live in such a competitive world, when people apply to go abroad, this is something which is considered to be a brownie point, on which I'll come to you, Hassan Saab. I think in this regard we must of course also talk about the need for us as a Pakistani society to work on actively boosting sports tourism. So when it comes to of course having the right policies and of course the right legislative framework in place, what do you feel needs to be done in this regard so as to of course make that change from having conventional sports tourism to of course having more recreational sports tourism?
It's important that, firstly, we have facilities and places that work for you locally. In order to attract people to come from other places, in order for tourists to come here, it has to be something that the locals look at and go, okay, we're happy to have these. Do we have those facilities? We kind of keep focusing on the things like, okay, we'll make sure there's great food and we'll put on some color and everything. But what else is there?
Right.
People wanting to come here to partake in sports, for whether it's arranging cricket tours, whether it's things like people wanting to learn more about hockey, which a lot of people seem to forget. Pakistan was once the greatest hockey nation
it's a national
on
sport
the planet. We've got an international squash athlete here with us today. So why are we not doing more for people to come here to want to learn those things? It's because our own facilities, unfortunately, for the most part, aren't up to scratch at the moment. Till we don't fix that locally, I don't think we'll be able to move on to a level where others will want to come here.
So in terms of investments, if you were to bifurcate, what are the issues you feel we need to work on? Is it, the infrastructure then? Is it, of course, to attract more foreign investment, perhaps better marketing, better advertisement? Or do you feel that, generally the policies per se, they need to be more conducive so as to be able to attract tourists?
All of those things have to come in, but at the end of the day only when they're all regulated properly and there is accountability. No one is going to want to keep investing in a system where they're not going to see any returns. No one is
Right.
going to want to keep investing in a system where if there is a problem, you don't know who you're going to go to. If you're going to say, well, why don't you go and talk to the ministry? Why don't you go and talk to the police? Why don't you go and talk to the sports board? That's too many things. It has to be under one umbrella organization
Right.
that is in charge and making sure that all of it is covered properly. For us to do that, we first have to get our own house in order.
Of course.
And when you are asking whether it's foreign companies or local companies to invest, they have to see a return. Just simply telling them every
Right.
time that we'll put a nice logo up on the wall and then the wall is the only thing left and the entire thing is gone is not going to help anybody.
Of course, and I think in this regard that, public-private partnerships, they are the way forward. And on which I'll come to you, Norina. I think in this regard, we must, of course, also talk about your entry into sports and, of course, then you're taking it up as a proper professional career. So, considering that, sports is considered to be a male-dominated profession, what was it that actually, interested you to join this profession and not only join it, but also, to so successfully sustain yourself throughout?
For me, I would say that when I started, I didn't even know that it's a male thing or a female thing because I was just 11 years old when I started it, and in an area where women coming out of their houses was such a big taboo. And that was my curiosity that actually brought me here. I was just 11 years old. My father was a politician. And I used to be very curious that why in this entire village, no woman is ever seen on the road or in the car or something like that. So my father just got me a cycle and I actually started with that. And I used to, whenever he used to be never home, I used to just go out and explore. And to my curiosity, from one village to other village, whenever I used to just go there, I would try to see women. I used to watch them and I used to try to search for them. And my curiosity even grew further that there are no women there. All these panelists and you actually talked about the problems that arises after.
But I think in this regard, of course, the credit does go to you because, keeping in mind the fact women do have to face greater barriers, be it in terms of social, cultural restraints, I think is a big achievement on your part, on which I'll come to you, Rai. Now, we understand the fact that, not only in Pakistan, but world over, we see that, societies are divided. But when it comes to sports fortunately happens to be that, one unifying power which kind of unites people. So when we talk about it, from an analytic viewpoint, how particularly do you feel can we use sports to bridge the gaps which do exist in any society, be it Pakistan or otherwise?
It's a saying that cricket defines nation's mood, and especially in case of Pakistan. If teams is performing well, our mood is okay. If it's not performing well, we are furious. Cricket day is something that results in what kind of mood are we going to have later in the day. That is one thing that brings us together. Another thing that we said, that education and sports, the disconnect between the education and sports, the best thing about sports is that it teaches you how to take defeat, how to take it to the chin and move on. That is something we are lacking as a society, especially when children are not playing sports as they should be. They are lacking that element in them.
This is why I actually raised that question to you, that why is it so necessary to inculcate these skills in children at a very primary school level?
Sports also teach you how to behave as a team, as a unit, not as different pieces, as a collective unit. That is something that brings you together. Then there is a common interest. You and I, maybe two different people, but we are supporting one club, one sports, one team. That brings us together, and that is something which can bring a greater harmony in a society. Especially in the places like Pakistan, where so many different languages, so many different cultures are speaking. But one cricket team, one hockey team, one squash athlete, that he or she or they unite us together.
Norina, coming towards you, I think this also leads us to a very interesting angle, that too, of course, from the perspective of being a female sports person. I was reading this report that, women who play basketball and soccer, they are less prone to actually, basically developing osteoporosis when they do reach their 50s or that age of menopause, so to speak. So as a, female sports person yourself, what effect do you feel do sports have, and of course positive effect when it comes to women's not only physical health but also their psychological and of their emotional health?
I'm extremely lucky that I'm a female athlete. Like, I mean, I'm an athlete. Why? Because I get to know about my sports. I get to know about my body as well. I get to know about my mental health as well. A human actually needs a lot of endorphin in their body to be released. A human has to take at least 10,000 steps a day to lead a healthy life, to lead a healthy mental health routine and stuff like that. So for me, as a patient of insulin disorder, as a patient of mental like, you know, anxiety, acute anxiety and stuff like that, the only escape that I have is, like, you know, from this world is my own sport and how I actually go to the gym and stuff. For me, it has given me that confidence and that ability to overcome all the problems in my life, and so many other things that this materialistic world, like, you can say that so much mixture of the food is there. It is affecting my health, it is affecting everything. That is kind of a detox for me. So I think for women it's extremely important. So yeah, for all
And
the
this is
humans.
why I pose this question to you, because, you know, a lot of times we very conveniently ignore these aspects of the conversation, on which I'll come to you. Usman Sahab, I think she's very rightly so detailed, of course, giving her own female narrative on this. So when we talk about sports psychology for the benefit of the masses and for the people who are watching this show, can you tell us what is it and why is it so important for us in Pakistan that when we talk about ensuring that, you know, our players are fit, it is important that they do get, you know, all these sports psychologist services in due, of course, in due time too?
Well, I mean, sports psychology is very important because it enables an athlete to deal with the highs and lows of competition. Many tennis players abroad, they have their own sports psychologist with them.
Right.
Because leading up to a match and then dealing with whatever result is after the match, there's so many different emotions that are involved. And the stress of competition can be so much that it can just lead you to have a breakdown. So the need to have a specialist who helps an athlete or a sports person deal with the different stresses is absolutely important.
It's paramount.
Absolutely.
And I understand that by that virtue, you need to be accompanied by such professionals
Yes.
when you're traveling to.
Most of the time we don't even know that we are struggling with our mental health. That's the biggest issue. I mean, if I have a muscular pain, I know that there's a pain, but when it comes to mental health, I don't even know. Most of the people
Right.
don't even know that.
And I think this becomes extremely important, right, when we talk about, you know, ensuring that, you know, the players, they don't take that pressure of playing when playing very important tournaments. So this is something that we need to talk about as a society.
And during the COVID time, there was a COVID bubble, and
Right.
they have to live in that bubble. Many international foreign players complain bubble fatigue, but we haven't heard anything like that from any of Pakistan's cricketers. As if bubble fatigue was just for them, not for Pakistani cricketers, but it was there. But they didn't know that they are having a bubble fatigue.
Right.
They are having issues with their mental health. So that is one thing which is very
They
important.
need to be educated about
They need
the
to be
same,
educated that
basically.
if they are struggling, it is there, and they need to talk about it.
So coming towards you, I think in this regard, we must, of course, you know, also talk about, you know, the positive trends which have emerged, so to speak, when we talk about, you know, analyzing sports more particularly. I think cricket, because of course we all understand that, you know, Pakistan is just crazy about cricket. So as a female, I feel one positive thing which has emerged is the fact that, you know, we now see more female commentators, we see more female sports journalists. So in this regard, what do you feel are the positive trends that have evolved when it comes to, of course, you know, evolving of sports as a profession, and what are those trends that we need to, you know, capitalize on?
Well, it's wonderful to see that there's more commentators, it's wonderful to see there's more broadcasters, it's wonderful to see that there's more journalists, more women talking about the game and talking brilliantly about the game. They're not just filling out any numbers, they're not token people there. They know what they're talking about. They're as good as anybody else. Now, what we need to make sure is that the system gives them an equal opportunity.
Right.
At the moment, they're all beating the system to get there. It's not easy. Anybody who says that it's easy for them, it's not. There has been this kind of narrative attempt in Pakistan to say, oh, they're only getting that far because they're women. No, it's the
Right.
opposite. They're having to fight through a very male dominant. So unfortunately, that is something they have to deal with, and we're seeing our female commentators, analysts, journalists, broadcasters fight these things, go through. They're inspiring girls. They're
Right.
inspiring girls, not just in Pakistan, but around the world to step up. We must work on this. It
Right.
can't be something that, you know, we kind of think, oh, so it's happening, let it keep happening. There has to be a system in place
Of course.
that allows them to allows them equal opportunity so that the very best people come through.
Right.
And in that regard, when people are condescending that, oh, you know, let's have a women-only system, or let's have a system that, no, have an equal system and then give the women the opportunity, and they will shine on their merit like they all have to get this far.
Right. Point is that the system itself should be very facilitative and of course enabling. On which, Norina, I'll come to you. I think it's very important to have your real life narrative on this. When we talk about, of course, you know, other challenges that, you know, female sports women face in Pakistan. So what would those challenges be it in terms of, you know, social cultural barriers, be it in terms of structural barriers, or any other, you know, system related issues that they do face, not only in actually entering into sports, but also in, you know, sustaining themselves?
The way you have read my story, and I hope the other panelists, including Usman and Azlan, and know my story. I had to disguise as a guy to play cricket. And in that time, I actually used to know only Shahid Afridi, and I wanted to be like him. And I actually realized later that I cannot be like him because I'm a woman. And then later on, Nida actually became my hero. So for that, I had to first watch her, and that she was never on screen for me. And my challenge, like you can just say that I'm right now sitting in Peshawar. I have spent more than 14 years away from my mother who lives in Deer. And I happen to be the first ever female athlete in a century or maybe more from the Malakand division, which actually includes Swat, Deer, Bajod, Buner, Shangla, and Chitral. So just imagine, people do say that you should be very proud that you're the first ever to do anything like that. And I always tell them that I'm very tired of this title, because every time I go back to my village, the eyes are on me. People are just ready to, like, you know, put anything on me, the responsibility of like representing them well, dressing well, you know,
Right.
taking the culture well and stuff like that. So for me, without a father, without a brother, without finances, everything was so hard that I had to first disguise as a guy because there was no girls team in Peshawar.
Right.
And when
I
found
also
one,
remember reading
yeah.
in one of your
Yeah.
interviews, Norina, that you had to get your hair cut short to be able to
Yes,
train
yes.
with men when it came to,
Yeah.
you know, making your mark in the cricketing field.
Yeah, quality cricket, you could say. I have fought so much for this in the KP region. Maria Tur had done that. I have done that. One of my cousins went to all boys school in Bajod agency for 10 years, more than me. She didn't have to disguise. But you see, this is how inclusion is not there for women. That
Exactly.
is how hard is it for women. I mean, people do say that women are not stronger, female athletes are not stronger as men. Sometimes it makes me laugh. We say that we start our war right from the houses, from the doorstep. You guys just go to the ground. You guys are so free. You just have to just get there and compete. We have to compete from our rooms. We have to compete for our identification. We have to tell our mother that, okay, I like cricket and I want to play. And we will have arguments. We will have so many fights at home. We will have so many, you know, like just
Of
to
course.
fight for my right to play. And for
Right.
me, I have played cricket in a situation that most of the time the writers who actually write my story, they say that this is so like fascinating and terrifying at the same time, that there were bomb blasts at the back of, like, you know, where I lived in Deep
course.
Timargara.
Right.
I am happy that there is a credit that actually people give me, but I think my work is going to be more respected. My work is going to be more credited when I won't be the only female athlete or
Right.
athlete sitting in 4 governing bodies and making policies and fighting all
Of
these
course.
ministers alone.
Of
I think we need to have more such athletes. I don't want to be
Right.
on every interview talking about all these things. I want more squash players, male,
Of course,
female,
and
both.
you know, by
Yeah.
watching you actually talk about these issues, I'm sure a lot of other female athletes or aspiring female athletes, they will get inspiration. We must also, of course, talk about football, because I think we're talking about cricket generally and other sports. So when we talk about football, we understand the fact that, you know, it has become more popular in Pakistan over a period of time. But for those, especially for young people who want to make a career in football, what would your tips be, you know, considering that, of course, football is not as financially lucrative as perhaps other sports are?
The options are very limited, I must say, but the craze is there. I saw visuals of a football match in Waziristan, and the place was buzzing. Places like Gilgit-Baltistan, places like Quetta, places like Karachi. There's a place in Karachi which is called Mini Brazil, just because the kind of craze they have for the Brazilian football team. I belong to Faisalabad, and I know places in main city Faisalabad where cricket is not the most popular sport. Kushti, kabaddi, and football are the sports that people like to follow. For people to have a career in football, we first need a setup for them.
Right.
We don't have a setup for them. We don't have proper clubs there. We don't have patronage for those clubs there. In the developing markets like Pakistan, India and Bangladesh, younger generation is more inclined towards following football than cricket, and that is the biggest challenge ICC is having. So there is a craze, and historically people who have been following football.
On which I'll come to you, Usman Sahab. I think in this regard, we must also, of course, talk about, the LLM that you are pursuing in sports law and policy. So when we talk about there being a scope for, of course, sports lawyers like yourself, where do you see a sports law evolving, perhaps a decade from now?
Well, I see sports law evolving in, I think, two basic things in Pakistan. One is for benefiting the athletes, the sports persons, and informing them of their rights, informing them how to protect themselves. And two, legislation.
Right.
Our current sports laws are so outdated that the parent ordinance is of 1962. Then after that, rules were made in 81. Then they've been recently amended in January 2022. But the fact is that all of those various laws need to be updated, upgraded, and developed. For example, in all of these laws, it's the name that has been given to a sports person is a sportsman. So there's no sort of gender inclusion. There's no sportswoman. There's no sports person. Also, there's nothing in those laws about giving equal opportunities to sports women. And also physically challenged athletes as well.
Right. I think he raised some very valid points on which I would want you to deliberate. So when it comes to, of course, ensuring, inclusivity of young people, of differently able persons, of women, that too particularly belonging from the rural areas of the country, how are you people working so as to, ensure that when we talk about, sports as a career, sports as a profession, it is reflective of all parts of the Pakistani society?
The most important thing, Fatma ji, that you have to start with is you have to have the desire. You have to want to make this change, not give lip service to it, actually do work. Often we hear people say, oh, well, why don't the girls just go and train after the boys are done? That's not equality. Unfortunately, in our system, we need to have female-friendly spaces where the female athletes can go. Now, yes, I understand sometimes people say, well, then why must we have these facilities, because then they're covered, things like that. Look, you have to make them comfortable. You're not going to be able to, unfortunately, change cultural norms that have existed for hundreds of thousands of years overnight. Give them a safe space where they can practice and give them the opportunity to go and play sport.
But how inclusive is it of differently able persons? Because I often feel that, this is that segment of the Pakistani society which is ignored, whereas if you see, other parts of the developed world, their participation in sports is extremely important for community building.
Especially when we consider that Pakistan, when we talk about cricket, which like we said is so much more than a sport for Pakistan, Azlan will back me up on this. Our record in blind cricket and deaf cricket is exceptional, but we've not built on that. We've not continued to go ahead and build on that. Pakistan has people who are able to be fantastic athletes, even if they are differently abled. But how many people do we actually end up sending to the Olympics for differently able people? Not enough. Again, simply because, unfortunately, in our society, exists this thinking, but if someone is differently abled, why would they want to go out there and play sport?
On which I'll come to you, Norina. Now, I understand the fact that, actively work so as to put forward the plight and, of course, the challenges that young female athletes face like yourself. And in this regard, I also understand the fact that, you've put forward a 14-point agenda. So could you please tell us more about this agenda, that, what have the policy proposals been in this regard and what affirmative action has followed accordingly?
I'll be very straight about what I felt there was a need of it. Just like Usman, we didn't know about the concept of sports lawyers. I actually pushed that to the sports minister and the committee. They were very surprised about that as well. That we do have the sports lawyers who can actually help us through legal issues that we have with the federations, with the media, with the coaches, with so many other people. And we're trying, and I'm so happy that through me, KP is becoming the harassment-free zone for sports, but there's still a lot of work to do. There's another thing that I have worked on is the insurance that include the mental health support as well. We have sports psychologists who sits in Canada, but actually is with us through Zoom and all of these sessions. And I'm happy that I'm the one who actually initiated it. Other than that, we have sports therapists, this physios and stuff like that. We have grounds. We have now included different sports squash courts and basketball teams and so many other things in the government schools. And we're trying to be a bridge between the HEC in KP and the colleges and the sports department. But there's still a lot to go. The 14 points out of them, only 8 to 9 are initiated, and we are working on it, but there is a lot of problems. And sometimes interestingly, my own mother says that what will you get out of it? I said, okay, I'm not getting anything out of it, but tomorrow the girls will be fine, the boys will be fine. Like this one incident that I really want to quote is that I go in a rickshaw or taxi or anything like that, and I propose that we should have a bus service because we have enough fund for that. And this one time my brother was like, why do you go like this, like in your tracksuit and stuff? And I was like, you know what, there is no facility of changing within the stadium. Just imagine I'm an international player, I'm one of the senior players from KP and the Peshawar stadium, yet I don't have the facilities. So imagine how many other girls or guys will be facing all these things. Or you can say I didn't have the access to physiotherapist or mental therapist and all of these things. So whatever I used to do experiment on my own, I used to put it down to the sports minister, and he was kind enough to listen to me. And the financial support that we have been giving to the squash players now, we have more than 36 international players, junior players playing around the world. And just one last thing is that last year we had 3 medals for the first ever time in the history of squash in the US Junior Open, where the gold was ours in under 19, where silver was ours from under 19, and even the silver was the bronze was ours from under 19. So you see, when you start investing and you have accountability, everything actually gets into the place.
Right, Noreena, your point is noted. Onward, sir, I'll come to you. And before we conclude today's show, I think it's very important that we also talk about, of course, laws and policies that we need to have so as to facilitate all those who do not only want to actually be a part of sports in Pakistan, but also who are able to sustain themselves. Because a lot of times we see that, a lot of youth potential is there, but they can't, kind of capitalize on it or mobilize it because of a lack of resources. So as a lawyer, of course, on the panel, what would your proposals be in terms of improving our laws, in terms of improving our policies when it comes to, improving sports, both quality as well as, of course, its standard overall in the country?
Well, I think it's important that the Pakistan Sports Board, along with the provincial sports boards, play a consultative role with all the various sporting federations that exist in the country. There are so many. There's the baseball federation, the golf federation, the squash and tennis federation. There are all of them. The point is that within those federations, they have a very sort of random type of regulations or copy-pasted regulations being used. The fact is that all it takes is a consultative process from the top, from the Pakistan Sports Board, and then to the provinces, and then with all the sports boards. Taaki at least people then know, athletes know, that this is our body, this is where we have to go to, this is what is in place, and everything should be transparent.
Right.
The stakeholders are the athletes.
Of course.
So they have to be taken on board.
Right.
But it seems to be is that it just happens that.
And I think the response needs to be coordinated as well. I think something which you earlier, kind of pointed towards. So coming towards you, I think we must also, of course, talk about the very pivotal role of media in this regard, more particularly when it comes to, of course, not only promoting sports per se as a profession, as a career in the country, but also, in ensuring that we do away with those typical gender stereotypes, which we do unfortunately face, most of which Norina was kind enough to mention. So when it comes to the very important role of media, how do you feel, media can play this role? And, not only talking about talk shows and, of course, sensitizing people through the content of talk shows, but also, perhaps making movies on such topics.
One of the things when you talk about movies is a lot of us learned about our own history when there was a movie made about an Indian athlete, which portrayed one of our very great athletes as being useless. When you actually went and checked the records, our athlete had more medals.
Right.
He's the one who didn't have the movie, and the guy who was second best to him got a great movie. Now, of course, as long as you're able to tell that narrative, that's how it's going to be. It boggles the mind that Pakistan is 75 years old now as a country. There have been no movies, no locally made documentaries on your very first test win, on the very first time that you won a match at the Oval, defeating England. There's still been nothing about the 1992 World Cup. Hockey, there are innumerable achievements that Pakistan squash. 19 years, you dominate a sport. Not one film, not one document. We see little things here and there, not enough. Now, one thing that we constantly keep hearing from our media is there isn't an interest. People don't want to know. In all honesty, Ji, I think it's lazy to stereotype it that way, that there isn't an interest. When you make something, there will be an interest. When you talk about, that means the pressure is on you to make something good.
Of course.
The pressure is on you to make something, create something. We saw...
And sir, I think as a media person myself, I feel the trends have really changed. Now the audience, they are very educated. They would want to watch something which of course has a benefit from them. It's all the, about the way you want to particularly present something. And before we conclude today's show, I think a very important aspect, which of course we must not miss during the course of today's, show, is the fact that, there was this time, of course, that, people did used to be very actively engaged in hockey, so to speak. And hockey, as we all understand, is, of course, our national sport too. So where do you feel, did we, lose that connection as Pakistanis with this national sport? And how do you feel, can we rekindle that connection?
I think overall, if we see around the globe, hockey is a dying sport. It's a very sad thing to say. It is a very exciting sport still as compared to cricket, even T10 cricket. It is still far more exciting sport when it comes to hockey. But it's a dying sport. We need to see that where we can come up with the ideas that can resonate with current kind of appetite we have for the sport. So that is something that needs to be done. Also, very interestingly, a legend is that hockey is actually indigenous sport of Punjab. There's a game called Khiddu Kundi. Kundi is like hook, and Khiddu is a ball created from clothes. So that has been developed into hockey. So this is something that has a very deep roots in this region. AstroTurf changed the ball game altogether for us. The countries who adopted that have gone far ahead from us. Places like Argentina, Korea, even South Africa for that matter, Australia, Netherlands and Great Britain, and places in South America, they have gone ahead from us. That has been a reason. There was an interesting stat that only Amsterdam has more AstroTurfs than the whole of Pakistan. So when we talk about these kind of facilities, we cannot expect us to blossom in that sport. Also, the kind of display you have on the field will resonate with the kind of emotional attachment you have. There was a time when Pakistan used to come down to position number 2 on the world ranking. People used to have high blood pressures. That is the kind of emotional attachment we have.
Times have completely changed. So in your viewpoint, basically, that connection that can't be rekindled, basically.
It can be rekindled. The Hockey Federation is trying to come up with a league to rekindle that emotional attachment with that league. They are coming up with the idea of Global Rising Star. Anyone under the age of 18 who is good enough can be part of that league, and if Pakistan manages to execute that league, that will make Pakistan the only country in the world with an active hockey league in the world.
But I think regardless whether that connection is rekindled or not, I think cricket will always have that, emotional, overpowering, overshadowing kind of an, I think, impact on all of us as Pakistanis.
Yeah, because that has happened over the years. Last time we won a World Cup was in 1994 in hockey. But in case of cricket, we have been achieving laurels on the ground.
Right, Rai, your point is noted, on which I'll come to you, Norina. And before we conclude today's show, I think it's extremely important that we talk about the very pressing need to have women in important positions of power. And this is something, of course, that we do see in other professions, be it, for that matter, judiciary, be it for that matter, politics. So if we were to have, women in important positions of power, that too in sports as a profession, what kind of a trickle-down effect do you feel would it have to all the, young and aspiring female athletes, so to speak?
This actually take me to a point where I have noticed, as much as I have worked with all the athletes, female athletes in Pakistan are more educated than men. Whether it's on the on the regional level or national level or international, you pick any of the athlete, and someone might be doing a PhD on scholarship in Nottingham. One of the Scotch players is doing that. Someone might have done something from Ohio University, like Sana Mahmood, one of the basketball captain, is doing that, and she's back to work here. So the thing is that we do have these educated women who actually can do so much for sports, but the problem is that stereotype is there, where we think that women cannot actually do administration. When you're talking about all this, let me remind you that we are the homemakers. This is the title that you have given to us. You give us money and we can actually make a house a home, right? So how about you give us the money, the funds to make the stadium the home for us and make it safe for us. Like, for example, my presence has changed a lot of perspectives within the office, where all of these new innovative stuff and updated stuff that I have brought to the outdated tables of the government, they have been very impressed. They have been working on it, and I am considered as one of the brains of KP Sports, and I think that's a huge responsibility. And as I mentioned, that many people, including older men and coaches and all of these guys, actually come to me if there is a penalty on a kid of let's say international penalty of $22,000 or something like that. How can we take our kids out of that? So when I'm asked these questions, I'm just very happy. The tips I would say would be that you include women from the start, from the bottom. I don't see women as guards. I don't see women as the PNs. I don't see them in the accounts department. I don't see them as coaches. I don't see them as physiotherapists. I don't see them as trainers. And this is quite unfortunate. 56% of Pakistan is made of women.
Take example from, and of course by that virtue take inspiration from. I'd like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, Usman Saab.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much, Hassan Saab.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. And thank you so much, Rai, for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you so much, Norina, for your precious time.
Thank you so much for giving me the platform.
Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about the importance of sports as it does exist in the Pakistani society, whereas of course nobody can deny the importance of sports in the Pakistani society as it does stand today. What is more important is, of course, to ensure that sports as a profession, sports as a career is of course more inclusive of different people in the Pakistani society, which of course by that virtue does include women. It by that virtue also includes differently abled persons. For this to happen, it is extremely important that we not only have policies which facilitate the same, but also a system which is enabling to that effect. On that note, signing off for today. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.